Good morning. This is another session of IDG, Informal Discussion Group, a carry forward from college days. College means St. Stephen's College for all of us. And today we have somebody who actually grew up in college, Aditya Arya. Most of us went to college after finishing school, but during school days, he was running around the corridors of college and spending time with in the gardens. But Aditya is better known as the founder of the largest camera museum in Asia. And today we'll talk about his love for photography. Incidentally, if for those of you who haven't seen it, in today's Indian Express, there is almost a quarter-page article about Chashme Badur, where Aditya was part of the team, and he shot some stills, and we'll talk about that. So Aditya, welcome, and let's start the IDG.
Good morning, Sonu. Good morning, all. Thank you, Vijay, for putting me in touch with Sonu. And I mean, this is absolutely wonderful meeting so many Stephanians on this platform. Because for me, college was a very special place. I was born there and I was there for 35 years. So my father joined college as a lecturer in 52 and he retired in 94. And our house was next to the Allnut Gate, the first house. And I also saw part of the college. I mean, Rudra, Mukherjee blocks were constructed in front of me. I remember in early 60s, and there were just four or five families in college in 60s. And it was a very lonely place, but I really thoroughly enjoyed college. I used to just walk around the corridors, and during summer months, I used to have the entire college to myself. I used to play in the Allnut blocks and Mukherjee blocks, and all the gyps for my friends, and they taught me how to make the college, the famous scrambled egg, and which was fantastic. So college for me was and continues to be a very special place.
Yeah.
And there are very few of us. There's just 3-4 of us who can say that they have that kind of engagement with college. Most of the people like Dr. Baker and they joined in early 70s in front of me, and so people used to come home and we used to have a lot of interaction with them, and so this was for me, college is a very special place.
Yeah, as it is, I guess, for all of us. We all have different can we ask anybody who's not on mute to be on mute, please? Sorry about that. Yeah, so besides growing up in college, Aditya, and which is very different from all of us, there was another thing which I found different about you, and that was that even before you hit college as a student, you knew exactly what you wanted to do, which was to become a photographer. So your father, you said, was the head of Hindi and Sanskrit at college. You grew up in college. How did this love for photography come about?
Being alone, and so there was only one person of my age group. That was Amin Saab's daughter, Ghazala Amin. We were the only two kids in the entire campus, and we used to meet occasionally. So I used to hang around and I used to spend a lot of my time in the college library. And college library was, today nobody goes to the libraries. People read everything online. For me, library was such a storehouse of information, and I used to spend hours there, and they used to allow me to take encyclopedias to home and bring them back. And I and college had a fantastic collection of encyclopedias and National Geographics. I remember each and every volume of National Geographics. So for me, the world, and to explore the world was a great idea. And so, in fact, I remember when Dr. Baker asked me in my first tute, uh, first year, he asked everyone, okay, what do you guys want to do? Okay, start with you. So I said, well, photographer. So he said, why? So I said, I can see the world and somebody else pays for it. And that was the idea. And photography is the only profession which I'll show you some slides. I've worked in mines, I've worked in automobile plants, I've worked in power stations, I've traveled all over the world shooting for the Oberois and Radissons. I launched many Oberois in Africa, and staying in these properties for months and getting to know people. It was such an experience.
Yeah.
And there is always somebody there to pay for it.
Yeah.
And so that was the idea.
Yeah, so you knew that you wanted to become a photographer, but you're talking about all the lovely times that you've had as a photographer. But the 1980s was a very different time than what it is today. And today it's okay for a child to come up to a parent and say, I want to be a photographer, I want to be a chef. But in 1980, I suspect your father fell off his chair when you told him that I want to be a photographer. How did he react?
So that's also very interesting. My father, he ran away from his house when he was barely 13 or 14 years old. He used to write Vedagya Arya. His actual name was Rao. He was South Indian. He was an Andhraite who was involved as a child in revolts against the Razakar movement and things, and he ran away from Hyderabad, and he landed up in Gurukul near Haridwar, and he studied on his own. So for him, this kind of I mean, he was very he didn't even bother. He said, yeah, sure. He was everything was acceptable to him. He just didn't he started writing Arya because of Gurukul, and my mom was from North India. They had to get married in a Arya Samaj Mandir. So for him, this adaptability, okay, whatever he wishes to do it. I mean, which was very important. They were his students, which I must tell you, his seniors, his students from 50s who were heading big corporates and things. This gentleman came home and, I need to call you home for dinner and things. And then he said, tried to brainwash me. He says, what's wrong with you? I mean, just tell me, which company do you want to join? And all my friends were joining banks and IAS, IFS. I mean, most of them are retiring as secretaries now. I said, look, I don't want to. I just want to be a photographer. And he said, no, think again. I'll come back to you. We'll line it up with you. Why don't you go join Tea Estate? Why don't you join just tell me, where do you want to go? So I said, look, I don't want to do a job. And Sonu, 40 years, I've not done a job. I've lived from day to day. I created everything for myself. I didn't expect my dad to pay for anything. Those days, lecturer's salary used to be 600 rupees. I couldn't expect him to, he couldn't buy a camera for me. So, I'll show you what he gave me. And I started with that in 70s. And that's how things evolved. Yeah. And I'm lucky. And because this gentleman, by the way, came back to me in late 80s, and he said, hey, how are you doing? So I keep reading about you in the newspapers and all, because I used to work with this. I used to do a lot of freelancing with this airline magazine called Swagat and Namaskar in 80s. And so I said, yeah, sure, let's meet. He says, I have something to talk to you about. So I said, what? He said, my son is in D school. He wants to give up and he wants to become a photographer. And so I said, oh my God, wait, this is going wrong now. So this is, I won't name this gentleman. He was one of the top executives in a, in a very big multinational company. He says, my son is, I don't know what to do. My only son has decided to be a photographer. So I have finally given in, and he's going to leave D school. And now tell him, make a list of what all he should buy, which country he should go to study. I said, wait, why don't you send him across to me? And I actually told him, I said, look, it's going to be a very tough profession for you, because as a photographer, you never know where you're going to be next 24 hours, where you're going to be living, staying. The kind of life you lead as a photographer is not really very fancy. Today, things have changed, but 80s and 90s were difficult, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah. No, so you did say that you spent 3 weeks with that apprentice of yours, and then you told his dad that he didn't have the hunger. So again, we see all the finished work of the photographers and the glamour of their results, but I don't think anybody understands how tough it is to carry that on. And it must have been tougher in the 80s when you set up after college.
So can I show you some pictures of what kind of work I was doing in 80s?
So I just want you to go back in your mind to say 1980 when you passed out and you set up and you got your assignments. How did you get your first assignment? How did you land up at Chashme Badur, for example, and then Jaane Bhi Do Yaro? Please tell us a little about.
So it all happened with a film called Sparsh. Sparsh was Sai Paranjpe's first film. And if you read that article in today's Indian Express, Ravi Baswani and all these people, we used to do theater in college. She was looking for a house to shoot, which was supposed to be Nasiruddin Shah's house in the film. And she landed up at our house, and she loved our house in St. Stephen's, and because we had a huge garden and everything. So for 10 days, she was shooting there, and I got to know her. I got to know the unit very well. We became friends. So her next film was Chashme Badur. She asked me, why don't you help us? And I just finished college. This was 80. And I said, okay, I can do some stills for you. And I enjoyed that bit. It was, it's very important. I'm not a trained photographer. Whatever I've done, I've learned on my own. And I firmly believe the self-learning process is very important, is when you work with some professionals and watch them, and you should pick up the right kind of stuff. And that's what happened with me. And after Chashme Badur finished, Kundan Shah was making a film called Jaane Bhi Do Yaro. I don't know, some of you may have seen that film. And it's one of the most classic films ever made in this country. And you won't believe, it was a very different kind of unit. It was friends. We were all living together. The whole film was made in 5.5 lakhs. This is 1981. 5.5 was peanuts for a film of that magnitude. And we were hardly paid anything, but it was fun. What mattered was in the evening, if you should have 50 rupees in your pocket. For 40 rupees used to be Old Monk bottle. And and there used to be a place called Neelam Ka Dhaba in Bandra for good chicken curry and tandoori roti. And that's where we used to go to Prithvi Theatre, have a rum there, then go to, and then I ended up living with Kher. He was also struggling. I met him there and we became friends, and we ended up sharing a flat in Bandra, and next to the Andrews Church, which is fantastic. 1.5 years of film industry. And I said, it's time to go back. I hated Mumbai. See, I grew up in university. I grew up in Delhi. All that greenery, the gardens, the space. I used to feel suffocated in Mumbai. It was really, that whole thing of living in a flat, living in a confined space and no gardens to go out to. And uh, so 82, I came back to Delhi, and then I started traveling, working for travel magazines.
Yeah, yeah. So, you didn't like Bombay only because of the claustrophobia, or did you not like the work that you were doing in the films?
The work was good, the money was good, life was fun, parties every night, absolutely wild parties. Yeah, because end of the party, nobody knew who was going with whom. It was bizarre. It was bizarre. I tell you, I mean, I've seen people like Mahesh Bhatt, and because, Anupam, and we used to all live together. And, those, I said, I'm going back because, um, and probably film industry was not the style.
Sorry, Aditya, we lost you for a bit.
Oh, okay. So basically, it was the lifestyle which kind of influenced me to head back to Delhi, because I didn't think Mumbai was the end all of photography.
Yeah.
And I mean, I had learned enough, I had seen enough, and it was time to move on.
Yeah.
And it too, I headed back to. I told Anupam, I said, one day I'll come back and pick up my bags. Till today, we have this joke, and I said, he said, मैं बहुत साल रख लिए, फिर उसके बाद पता नहीं कहाँ गए.
Yeah. So, I'll come to your collection and your love for collection just after this. But, when you come back from Bombay, and Bombay must, as you said, were heady days and you were like in the thick of everything. How was it to come back and then, look for assignments from scratch? Or did you already have assignments when you came back to Delhi?
So can I share my screen and show you the kind of works I did?
Sure.
Oh, you have disabled my screen share.
Just a minute. Let me enable it. No, I can. You can share screen.
It's disabled.
No.
Sonu, it's saying host has disabled. I tried it just now. Last time you'd given it to everybody. Maybe just give it to him.
I have given it, but
Yes. Okay.
you can now, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, you've disabled it again, Sonu.
No. Please.
Can you see my presentation?
Yeah.
Okay, so basically this is my how it started, and this is the camera which my dad had given to me. Can you see that Zeiss icon?
I can see a
Yeah.
camera. I don't know what camera it is. That you.
This
have
is
to
the-
guess.
No, it's there. Sonu on the left hand side.
Yeah.
Zeiss
Yeah, it's
icon.
the
Yeah.
Zeiss, it's the Zeiss, yeah.
And this is what happened in 81 after Jaane Budayaro. And after coming back to Delhi, Sonu, I decided to create my own work. And the only work which was available during those days was these glossy magazines like Swagat and Namaskar, which used to be published from Singapore and Hong Kong. And they started giving me work, and I started traveling. And one of the first assignments I did was I traveled down the Ganges for 6 months. And so, I just kept traveling. And then I headed to Nagaland for some time. And it ended up becoming almost a 6-year long association with Nagaland. I lived with these tribals, and I actually documented them. And today is one of the most interesting documentation of these Naga tribes. So I was on my own. I was creating my own work. I used to shoot assignments, and sell these images to magazines which used to carry these. This is what Nagaland used to look like in 80s. That one structure you can see, that is the church. Rest was all thatched huts. Today you will not see an image like this. The guy on the right hand side is the Ang of Chui. I worked here for almost a couple of months. He's sitting on his throne, which is the elephant skull. And he was one of the most powerful chiefs of Konyak tribe. These guys were great headhunters. And those days in 80s, this is Ang's personal collection in his drawing room. He had few hundred human heads in his drawing room. Nothing like this exists today. It's all been taken over and buried by the government, and basically church has been involved in that a lot.
So Aditya, did he kill these people himself or what? How is he?
Okay, so there were many reasons for headhunting. One of them was these, they used to be the tribal warfare, and to kill and to possess a human head is considered a power. It is very important that any person from a particular tribe should have few heads to his credit. And they used to display them in their homes. And look at the elaborate tattoos of those days. And these are pictures not shot during tourist festivals like Hornbill Festival today. This is when I was staying and living with these people from 84 till early 90s. I used to go every year, spend 4-5 months with these guys. And they started actually accepting me.
Yeah.
So tiger hunt was a very common practice. And I attended 2 tiger feasts where the tigers were actually chopped and cooked, and the head goes to the Ang.
Wow.
I used to travel so much that Pudin Hara brought out an ad on me, which said, in middle of nowhere assignments, I've learned to fix cameras, improvise lights, to do without exposure meter. What I cannot do without is Pudin Hara. These are real funny things, because my friends in advertising used to call me, said, look, I'm not feeling well. They said, you are a perfect ad for a Pudin Hara then. Climbing has been my a passion since college days, and every year for almost 7-8 years after finishing college, actually till as late as 6 years back, I did this Chadar trek. I've been going on expeditions, leading expeditions all over the Himalayas. That's been another side of my. In 90s, great industrial revolution started in India. Factories were coming up, and that was fantastic opportunity for me to travel, and one started getting assignments from factories, working in these industrial units. So for annual reports, and this was highly technical, but I enjoyed creating these images. These are complicated images, all shot on film cameras. Film was very expensive, and clients used to pay the earth to get these kind of images for their annual reports and brochures and catalogs. So this is where the money started coming from. So you name it, each and every pharma company like Reddy's and Abbott, then Ranbaxy, they were all my clients for their annual reports. And
Yeah.
industrial work took me all over the country with huge amount of lighting and assistants. Worked in mines. So I loved exploring these places. This was really beautiful part of it. It was, going to places and meeting people. This is Tata Steel in Tata Nagar. shot just about each and every steel plant in the country in 90s and early 2000s.
Yeah.
So these were very busy days. Products, because after the industrial thing, then came the products. So, you know, car shoots, mobike shoots. Um, uh, I was lucky. In late 80s, somebody approached me, says, I used to do a lot of performing arts. Will you work with Bolshoi Theater in Russia? So I said, yeah, but things were bad in Russia. So I said, let me make a preliminary trip. So 88, I made my first trip. And then subsequently for next 3-4 years, I was going back and forth, shooting all the performances. They used to specially perform for me in Leningrad, Moscow, Tashkent. So I used to keep my equipment also there, and they used to perform for me, and I used to shoot for their catalogs and brochures. Things started happening, buildings, construction activity. Then came the most interesting aspect is the food, which I really love enjoy shooting, and which is, again, it took me all over the country, hotel chains and restaurant chains and standalone hotels. And this required a different kind of skill, trying to understand the chef and their, this is for no, this is for Amul. This is for one of the butters, an ad for a butter company. I'm forgetting which one. Products, all kind of fine art products started. And then came another interesting, which is the hotels. And this took me all over the world again. This is Mina House in Egypt. And I spent months shooting all the properties for Oberoi's in, this is Radisson Kumarakam. So this is a property called Khyber, which I launched in Gulmarg a few years back. And I worked here for almost 3 years across many seasons. I shot Khyber. So most of the advertising campaigns evolved out of my work.
Absolutely stunning.
This is Vanne Vilas for Oberoi's again. And these are all, mind you, analog days where each shoot meant traveling with 200-300 kgs of equipment, lighting. But it was fun and it was challenging.
Yeah. So Aditya, as you're showing us these photographs, you know what hits me is that you've actually seen the evolution of India from.
Absolutely. From manufacturing to actually the whole economic activity. I keep talking to people. I said, photographers are the ultimate archivists of their times. They create archives. And this is something which I've been working on now, is archiving. And I'm digging into last 1 month, 2 months during lockdown, I've been going through all my images, taking out images, because these are stories which need to be told, and they will be told one day how things evolved. And photographers actually leave huge archives behind.
Yeah, yeah. So
This
this
is
is, you know, food was never a big deal in the 80s, and you know, now you're shooting food, hotels were not such a big deal. And today, I would assume that a lot of work comes from these categories.
Well, but you know, last 3 years I've stopped working because of the museum, and but this is a journey because it's very interesting. I'll tell you about my other journeys. There were many journeys which were going on simultaneously while. So I do many things simultaneously. I firmly believe that you have to multitask and you have to be constantly thinking about many things on many different levels, and okay, where are we heading and what do you want to do?
Yeah.
So you can imagine, it was, these places are fascinating. My task was to to sell them, which I enjoyed thoroughly, and to create stunning images. But my personal work took me to Ladakh a lot, where I shot extensively, documenting some of the monasteries like Alchi. I have created the world's biggest documentation of Alchi. I once lived there for a few months, and if somebody's been to Alchi, they'll know how important that monastery is. I documented it inch by inch. It was fantastic.
Yeah. So while you're showing us these photographs, you've lived with the tribals in Northeast, and then you've spent time with the industries and people there. Who is easier to work with? Who was more accepting of you?
Uh, See, that is one thing. A photographer has to be very, very adaptive, has to be very flexible. You have to work with with the products, you have to work with the models, you have to work with the tribals, you have to work on the street. You have to be, you have to understand the mindset. You have to understand how are people going to react to you, whether they're going to accept you or not. Are they going to see, photography is, there is always an uncertainty. What is going to happen next minute? When you get an assignment, you quickly study a lot about that place, that subject, or their product, or the factories, and you try and dig information. How dangerous is it going to be in that mine? What am I going to need? How am I going to, suppose if something happens? So to be ready for any eventuality is what a photographer needs to be ready for. But this is very interesting. While I was growing up, this gentleman, his name was Kulwant Roy. He used to come to college very often to our home. He was a family friend from my mother's family from 20s, when they were in Lahore. And he, as a kid, had learned photography from my great grand uncles, who used to apparently run a studio, whom I never met. Or this gentleman somehow started coming home, and he used to have one meal with us every day. He was unmarried. He had documented entire freedom movement from 30s onwards till and beyond freedom, till 60s and 70s. And when he passed away in 84, before that, he started leaving trunks with me and said, one day when you have time, open these trunks. And it's a very interesting story. I did not open them for 25 years. And this gentleman had shot some of the most iconic images of freedom movement. And in 2008, we used to have a guest room where I said, okay, let me open his trunks. And this is what happened. There were thousands of envelopes and packets, and this is all from 2008. And there was something crazy. I knew if I ever open these trunks, something will happen. And inside were all the images of all the meetings between Gandhi and Crepes, and all the missions who came to India, and all the closed door meetings of Congress as well as Muslim League. This is how the envelopes were stuffed inside, and I spent 3 years digitizing them, sorting he had annotated a lot. So like you see here, which says Gandhiji's Gandhiji with Khan, Abdul Ghaffar Khan, 1938, Northwest Frontier Provinces. You can see how the negatives are stuffed in there. He accompanied Gandhiji. So it ended up today, it is one of the most important collection. It's been to 8 countries as part of the National Gallery of Modern Art. These are many thousands of images from freedom movement, which I spent from 2008 till for 3 years. I was working on this project. While I was traveling and doing all these things, I was very fascinated by the history of photography. I ended up collecting thousands and thousands of cameras from all over the world and all kind of ephemera. So this was all in the basement of my house, and which was overflowing. And then the friends started loaning me their basements. Some hired their basements, and I kept collecting all this stuff. And now 2017, some government officers read about my collection, and they asked me, what do you wish to do with it? And a couple of them were Stephanians in Haryana government. And they said, what do you want to do with this? I said, I'm not going to be taking them with me. They have to be left here. I would like to create a museum one day. They said, okay, let's see how we can figure out. And within 7 months, we did an MOU, and they gave me a building, which you will not believe was a badminton court.
Badminton court in Haryana,
In Gurgaon.
in Gurgaon.
Yes. And in 17 months, I actually worked here every day. I drew the plans. We didn't have money for, so the government put in 10 crores. They gave me this land worth almost 100 odd crores. And I crowdfunded the entire interiors of the museum. I drew the plans. And this is what it looks like today.
Wonderful.
And this is where I'm sitting. These are the galleries.
This is a true labor of love. And actually, Aditya, when we talk about your museum, a lot of us, when we do Zoom meetings, we have virtual backgrounds. Your background looks like a virtual background, but is in fact a real one, because this is something which is visible, which I guess is seen only in photographs. So a lot of cameras, and when you talk about your museum, you'll tell us about the arts and culture. But staying on cameras, you found the camera that was used to shoot the Hiroshima bombings in a kabadi ki dukaan in Delhi. How did that happen? And how do things like these end up at kabadi ki dukaan?
So it's very strange. And there was a time when I used to look for them. Today they look for me. So it's very. So yesterday I have posted one picture of an Asahi Pentex. So one of my uncle, who was a very famous mountaineer, who introduced me to mountaineering, was Colonel Kumar, who passed away in December. And yesterday, his wife came and she gave me his camera, which he took with him to Everest in 1965, because he was the deputy leader of that expedition.
Photo museum which I want to show you in Gurgaon.
And this camera, Pentex, and so I posted about it, and I said, now this camera has come to me, to the museum. It's funny how things do. So that was very strange. I'll take you to that World War II camera, because that World War II camera was actually, you'll be surprised, I found them with a kabadi in India. The photographers during World War II were trained in Kharagpur. And Kharagpur was one of the training grounds for American Technical Corps.
Really?
Like Calcutta was a RNR, so was Shillong, but Kharagpur was a training area. And these cameras must have been left behind or somehow, and somebody located me and convinced me. I said, look, I need to see them because I don't even know what they look like. And sure enough, they were, and they're all in fantastic working condition. And also very important that we're talking today is 6th June. And exactly 2 years back on the 6th June is when I actually did the Havan, and in memory of my dad, because it was his birthday. And we actually launched the museum uh, in a soft way.
Yeah.
So today is that day, and we're sitting here and talking about the
Yeah,
museum.
it's an auspicious day. But looking at this photograph, I see one person shooting a photograph with a mobile phone. So the question that I have is that, earlier photography used to have this mystique and glamour because there were just very few photographers and really good ones. But now with the advent of these phones and phones with cameras, photography is kind of been democratized.
Democratized.
Anybody and everybody thinks that they are a good photographer, and then you have special effects, and then you have adjust brightness, adjust contrast, etc. As a professional photographer, what is your view on this whole development that has been taken, that it's going over all over the world? Has it you know so I won't
So
put words in your mouth, but
photography is not about the equipment today. It's about the art of seeing. It's about how you see things. I keep uh, comparing art with photography. See, art is when an artist sits in front of his canvas, he starts with uh, a blank canvas, and the image is in his mind. He visualizes the image. A photographer actually looks through his viewfinder, and he excludes and includes what he wishes to say, because the canvas is there, the image is there. He recomposes his story and captures that. Now comes the another thing is you can do manipulation later on, include things. Now there is no end to it, because photography is, so it's about art of seeing today. It's about how you visualize things, how you see things.
yeah, yeah. Photography actually is a lot of science. Your dark room, the equipment, and all of that. But a lot of the photographers have been through liberal arts. I don't find, too many photographers who studied physics or chemistry or, any other science. How do you explain this? That it's a very science-based profession, if you want to call it that. But the people who are who are part of it are all creative people, which is not, what science is about.
So it's very interesting. Photography is the only art form, one of the few, I mean, you can say filmmaking is, which has a very deep link with the craft and technology. And all these photographers are very tech savvy people. In the sense is they like to do things with their hands. They like to work with their hands. They like to connect uh, various faculties. It's about what is now one of the most famous thing in photography is uh, the moment. So to be able to pre-visualize what is going to happen next, that is about preempting a situation. And photographers are always preempting situations. They know what is going to happen next. That guy is going to walk into the frame, and that is where he's going to click. So photography is all about preempting situations, about tech and understanding the lenses, the all the bits and bytes of the cameras. I mean, because the film is going out, but I am actually teaching a lot of analog processes here at the museum because it's time to slow down the present generation. There, otherwise, it's these 64 GB cards and I mean 32 GB cards are going to destroy. They shoot people shoot 5,000 images and then they spend more time deleting it. I call the present generation the delete generation because they spend more time deleting things than actually creating things.
Yeah.
Because the technology allows you to create at a fantastic speed and you don't stop. You just keep saying, okay, let's just click, I'll do it later on. There was no later on. It was, everything was created here first. It was pre-visualized.
Yeah. I mean, I remember that, taking photographs, it used to cost money because you had to buy the reels and then you had to get them developed. And therefore each frame or each photograph was shot with care. You couldn't just aim it anywhere and say ki baad mein dekhenge. Now it's actually, it doesn't cost anything. You
So-
don't have to get them printed if you don't want to.
So-
Sorry, carry on. Yeah. So how,
None of these cameras in my museum have one thing missing. One button which is there present in today's camera, which has destroyed photography, that is the delete button. So there was no delete button. See, the delete analog does not allow you to step back. With analog, the film only moves forward. So, and film only allowed you 12 exposures or 35, 36 exposures. The endless possibilities which the chip offers you, and also the possibility of constantly deleting and reshooting. So everything had to be pre-planned, preconceived, so the discipline which was there in analog times is not there today. I mean, we come from the discipline. We learned the hard way. Each and every shot had to be perfectly timed and technically perfect. There were no excuses. Today, you have a Photoshop which also allows you to manipulate.
Yeah.
This is another aspect of my life. This is the last slide on my presentation is what do I do? So St. Stephen's and my love for gardening and plants and things, and I always wanted to be a farmer. So at the age of 36, I set up a big farm and I grow lettuce, I grow things which I sell in the market, and it gives me great pleasure on the weekends to work at my farm. And so that's been the life.
Yeah. So Aditya, the photographs were fantastic.
Thank you.
Two questions. You've spent, 40 years or more as a photographer, or maybe even more. What is that one aspect of photography that you personally find the most fascinating?
Every day has been a new day. There are no, I mean, there's no repeat. I don't know. I mean, I was just last few days, I was just going through my diaries of last 10 years. And I said, oh my God, I was traveling every day. Today I was in Ranchi. Third day I was in Mumbai. Fourth day I was in Jamnagar. I said, and I was constantly planning, photographers planning, okay, what all equipment is he going to need? What is he shooting? So, that whole challenge of meeting new people, working in a new place and trying to create something new.
Yeah.
That keeps you going. I mean, photography is all about, there's been never a repeat.
Yeah, yeah. And what is that one or couple of myths about photography that you'd like to bust?
Ah, that today you can make money out of photography. Sorry, friends, those days are gone. I get hundreds of youngsters here who want to become a photographer because they think it's so simple and easy. Yes, it is simple and easy, but it's not about pressing the button. It's about the art of seeing. It's not about how technology has made it, as you said, democratic. But the art of seeing has still to be somebody has to teach you that, or you have to be born with that.
Yeah,
So that is not so simple. And and that I must say that today there are many million photographers in India. There were only 200 photographers in 90s. We used to all meet once in 2 years in some city to discuss, to learn from each other. Today you can learn everything from Google, but uh, the sheer numbers has devalued the, I mean, it's people are doing, it's yeah, it's sad. I mean, uh, it's good to have more photographers, but the quality is also going down because digital is not about perfection. Analog was about perfection. Digital is about imperfection, because digital depends a lot on post, while analog was, you had to create everything at the time of shooting that image, because there was no Photoshop. We used to figure out complicated situations. We used to sometimes shoot 20 situations on the same slide or same print. We used to layer them and that get a composite. Today all that can be done easily on Photoshop, and so it's very different and it's changed.
yeah. So basically, you've answered my next question, which I was going to ask, that, which one do you prefer, analog or digital? I think I've got my answer.
I'm teaching analog in a big way, but I'm running lots of classes for village children here. And recently, just before lockdown, I spent some time in Shekhawati in Mandava teaching village children, where iPhone has given me 15 iPhone 12s, and where we teach them the art of seeing now, because there is no tech now. It's about seeing. So because that has to be taken into consideration also, because that's another level.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So before I see I think a couple of hands, and I'll just come to them. My last question is that I can't let you go without getting some free advice on behalf of all of us. So all of us with our phones with cameras, what are three pieces of like Kunji advice that you can give us to enable us to take better photographs?
Buy iPhone 12. It's
Oh,
the
no, no, no,
ultimate.
no, 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 no. This
I'm telling you, it's
not
the.
being
Uh,
sponsored
I'm
by
I'm
my phone.
I'm so amazed at where the tech has. I have people ask me what's going to happen next. So I have a theory which I've been thinking about for last almost 10 years since the digital came, and I say the next step. What is the next step? Is there's going to be no phone. There's going to be no device. The ultimate device is your eye. I need to tap your optic nerve. I need to amplify that electrical signal which is traveling from your eye to your brain. I need to just amplify that and download it. That's it.
Yeah.
And because this is the ultimate lens, and if you need a shutter, you just have to wink, and that's it. Um, and I'm sure I've been reading a lot about it. There are people who have been thinking of tapping these. They've not been able to segregate lots of these signals. The day they can segregate these signals, you'll be able to download this.
So Aditya, I mean, hats off to you. You haven't shared even one secret of taking a good photograph, but let that be. So there are some hands. So Vijay, if you want to ask
Yeah. So I'll start about, since you mentioned secrets, I won't ask about photography. He's amply made it clear that it has to be visualized as you're born with it, or you develop a technique based on whatever exposure you get to people like Aditya himself. Yeah. So I just because he mentioned Ghazala during his younger days, so I want to probe on those secrets. So Ghazala, as you know, your photography effect has rubbed off on her, it seems. In the last 1 year, she's put in, I think, 70 modeled 70 sarees, and her kittu and her whole house. So I think she's going great guns there. But
I
there were
think
other girls there. There was Prema Rajpal and Dolly Kapadia. So share
Dolly
something
was
with
very
us.
senior to me. Dolly used to babysit occasionally when parents used to go out for dinners sometime in early 60s. So Dolly used to come home and babysit us.
Yeah,
I remember
lucky
that.
you.
Okay,
Yeah.
so Tanuja,
Yeah, thank you, Sonu, and hi, Aditya.
Hi, Tanu.
Yeah, I'm a keen mobile photographer, but then that question has not been answered by by you, which had been, asked by Sonu. So I would like to ask a second question. See, you told us that you used to carry around 200 to 300 kg of equipment with you in those good old days, or maybe in recent times also. So how big was your team? How many
So
people?
I had two assistants, and so when I was working abroad, typically companies like Oberoi or something, they used to allow me only one assistant. But I remember even for my trip to Africa, my excess baggage was something in close to 280 kgs. Why? The reason for that is we were shooting on large format cameras. We used to shoot on many formats. Each picture was shot on print, on film, on slide, on 35mm, on large format, and as I said, there was no Photoshop. The lighting had to be perfect. So we used to carry, what was all this equipment? Were the lights. There were huge lights which we used to carry. So it was very funny when I was once traveling from Canada uh, to US, and the customs in Toronto, somewhere where you have to cross over, so 6, 7 bags, and this custom officer asked me, are you shifting home? So I said, no, 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 I'm not shifting home. So these are just my equipments. And they said, okay, open one. And we opened, and he said, okay.
Rahul, you had your hand up.
How do you put your hand up, yeah? Sonu?
Oh, you just have. But there is an icon there. Okay, Rahul, no.
I just wanted to.
Can you hear me, Sonu?
Yeah,
Yes.
now we can hear you, Rahul.
Okay. No, Aditya, I thought fascinating talk. Just two things I'd like to share, which you mentioned. You mentioned Colonel Kumar, 1965. Now, wasn't he the same person who went on an expedition and planted a spy thing in the Himalayas?
Absolutely.
Same person, wasn't it?
So now you are talking about the famous incident which happened on this.
To spy on the Chinese.
This was not 65, it was 62 or 63. So this is I'm forgetting the name of this is where the storm happened just now. No, in Uttarakhand, what's it called?
Where they said it happened because of the radiation leak of the nuclear device.
This has been a very big question for many years, and I've talked to him in 70s and 80s also. So they suspect, the villagers are rightly suspecting. See, it was a 5 megawatt, or I don't know how. Not 5 megawatt. It was a 5 kg something.
KW. Kilowatt.
Nuclear device, which was carried up. And on the third day, when they were going up on the camp, there was a massive blizzard and a storm, and these guys had to rush back. And what they did was they just covered it and left it. And next year, when the season opened up, then the winter, they could not go up. And when next year, when they went up to locate that nuclear device, that device could not be located. But for the last 20 years, government has been secretly checking the waters of various tributaries to see if there is any radiation coming from anywhere. And there have been many expeditions to try and locate it, but they've not been able to locate it. So maybe it's gone down into a crevasse where it is generating heat, and that ice break which happened could have been the result of that.
Yeah, I skied with Colonel Kumar in Gulmarg in the 70s. So I remember him well. I'm sorry to hear that he's passed away. The second question.
It's very tragic. His son, that means my cousin, passed
His son
away.
was our classmate.
He passed away in August, and the father passed away in December. So it was.
Okay, I'm sorry to. The other thing was you mentioned Alchi.
Yeah.
Now I went to Alchi. I trekked there again in the 70s. I think early 70s. It was the first year that Ladakh was opened.
75, it was open, sir.
To tourists. So that's the year. That's the year I went, and I remember I went with two other friends, and we walked from the main road to Alchi because there was no road at that time.
Yeah.
And I photographed. There were frescoes there, Buddhist frescoes, I think, that were there. I don't know whether they're still there, but I photographed them. And then, do you remember Benoy Behel?
Yes.
Yeah, Benoy Behel has photographed that whole area also, I think. And he's made documentaries, if I'm not. So I met him and I told Benoy Behel, in 1975, I photographed those frescoes, which are very much like the frescoes in Ajanta, a little bit similar.
So Ajanta is 6th century.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
This is from 12th century.
Yeah, but there was a similarity, Now, are those frescoes still there, or have they just disappeared?
Absolutely there. In 2008, I spent few months, and with the help of Ministry of Culture, they allowed me to set up a generator, and we actually flew in a lot of lightweight aluminum structures and scaffolding from Delhi, thanks to Jet Airlines. Whenever the aircraft was going empty, they used to load my scaffoldings, and they actually transported them to Leh, and we reassembled them in the summer of 2008. And I spent a long time actually documenting each fresco inch by inch. Because the whole problem with that monastery is it's made out of wood and mud. So, and now last few years, it's been raining very heavily in Ladakh. So they're scared. See, ideally, they should create a protective dome around it. It's huge structure, but they should still do something about it because it's the only monastery of its kind in the world. And if you Google Smithsonian and write Smithsonian, Adityarya and Alchi, you will come up with a very beautiful article on my documentation, which I felt each and every site should be documented before it disappears forever.
Also, if I may add, once I was flying and in the plane, I was sitting next to somebody and I started talking about these things. And I mentioned Alchi. His close relative had written a book with photographs on Alchi. It's still lying with me. I don't know what the name was. Beautifully photographed book on Alchi and the frescoes. I don't know who that, I might be able to locate it, but so Alchi has been photographed.
Only once, sir. Actually, twice. Once by a German photographer who actually bribed somebody to photograph, and a Japanese photographer. But subsequently, nobody's been allowed to take pictures of Alchi.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
No, when I took it, 1975, there was nobody around. In
In
fact,
75, they were using it as a cowshed. I don't know whether you remember that or not. I was there in 76 summer.
yeah.
My first trip was there in 76 summer.
Okay.
So
Oh,
Great.
Yeah.
Neil had a question. Sorry, Rahul, did you finish?
no, I finished. I
Oh,
finished.
fine. Neil, you had your hand up.
I wanted to first thank Aditya for the fascinating journey. And it's very rare to find someone who follows his heart and his passion and makes a living out of it and enjoys it along the way. So it was really a pleasure to see the pursuits, intellectual and otherwise, which have been make the milestones of your life. I wanted to ask you, and you've touched on this in your comments. You see, the purpose of technology is to make things simpler. So for example, now with kids, and I have a 13-year-old son, so this is close to my heart. It's much easier now than it was in our time to pick up references and information and, mine data for scholastic work, for reports, for treatises, for dissertations. But I think the onus is even more that now that the sources are easy to find. Earlier, the game was finding the sources. So the guy who put in 6 sources and did the tough work finding them versus the guy who did 1 or 2 or the commonly found sources would normally edge ahead. Now everyone can find the same source. So doesn't it place, technology enables, but doesn't it place a greater responsibility now that you have the tools? Your output has to be even better. But I find, unfortunately, so that sort of progress is happening. The milestones are shifting in education and all that. It's unfortunate to hear in such a I would say, visual art which is so close to our history, and you put it very nicely, saying the photographer chronicles, it just doesn't capture. Isn't the onus on us now to take the ability to see, to train the eye to a better level? I think it really touched me. I think it's a common sign of our times. And I was making this comment in another group that with greater access to it, that photographers desire to travel. And people travel a lot more nowadays, but a lot of it is medallion tourism. I mean, they're just ticking check boxes. They've got those cameras, they're taking photos, but they're not really seeing. And they're not really experiencing. I mean, people like you who've actually a career and a life training your mind and training your eye.
Yeah, I think, Neil, we're losing you on and off. So
Sorry, can you hear me?
you can answer the question if you've heard.
Yeah, maybe I'll turn my camera off because it's affecting
Yeah.
my speech. So the point is that, it's like what Michelangelo said, that the purpose of he sees a block of stone and he says, all I do is strip away what I don't want, and what I'm left with is the sculpture. So that's a little bit resonated when you said that, I spend all my thought and effort composing, and the technology is then secondary. The main thing is the creative eye to see what should fill the lens. And with technology now, that's completely gone. Because of because of the ease of capture, because of the low cost of capture. Isn't it time to take our not just our creative people, but I mean everyone back to the next level of thinking, which is to use these tools which are easily accessible to everyone now, to get the mind trained to capture better.
Yeah. No, thank you, Neil. This is, this year. So after the museum started in 2020, 5 months after that, the COVID happened. We were very badly hit. And again, we reopened last year. And this Jan, Feb, we did very well, few thousand visitors a month. And one day in January, one man came and he inquired like, who's created this? And he was told, because I just have 4 or 5 people to run this museum. We've run out of money totally. And it's been really terrible because of the COVID. So he came to me and he says, this is fantastic. What are you doing about, I keep reading about you in the brochures, you teaching the art of seeing. So then I told him exactly my idea about, he says, yeah, this is exactly our idea. So I didn't even bother to really inquire too much who he was or where he was coming from. And, so we had chit chat. He said, can I see you tomorrow at 12? So I said, sure, I'll be here. Drop by, have a cup of tea with me. So we have a fantastic restaurant here in the museum. It's the best restaurant in the entire NCR. And I would like to invite you all. He came next day with a big bag and he said, this is for you. So I said, what is it? So there were these 15 iPhone 12s. And he said, I am from iPhone. And this is what you're talking about. The art of seeing is what. So we are using those phones to actually teach these village kids and the young kids the art of seeing, because there is no tech now in there. It's about how do you create a story? How do you create a visual essay? Because we are teaching tech also, but these guys, it's another level. So that is also very important, what you said. And we're doing that. And these kids are thoroughly loving it.
Yeah.
So Andy, if I may add, I still remember those darkroom days. The whole process of taking a photograph and your heart pounding when you open the film and develop it. And then you are printing each photograph and you see the image emerging under your fingers. And you're still waiting anxiously, what will be the effect of that photograph which I took? Did I miss the other things which I wanted to capture or not?
There was, the analog was like
a full creative process, it's like giving birth to and
okay, when I was working in Russia those days, I used to pack my films. So if I'm traveling for, say, something like 200 or 300 rolls of film, I used to pack them separately in separate bags. So why? Just in case if one bag gets lost. Okay. Then at the airports, I used to check in 4 hours before the flight, 5 hours before the flight. Why? I used to have battles with the security and the customs. Why? Those days, the Russian X-ray machines were deadly. And I used to insist on each film being opened, each can being opened and put back. It used to take like 3-4 hours. And after fight, because they used to say, no, niyat. So I said, no, you have to do it. And it was that persistence and to drive them mad till they used to say, okay, we've seen 100, let him go here now. He's not going to give up. So, the film, the unpredictability of analog, what's going to happen? You have chemicals, you have films, you have X-rays, you have all kind of heat. Oh my God, heat.
Yeah. Manisha, you had a question and then Amit.
Maybe you.
And you, of course, Murli, sorry. So ladies first now. First Manisha, then Amit and then you. If Manisha is not there, if Amit?
Yeah, hi Aditya. I'm meeting you after about 30-35 years. You were senior to me in college.
Yeah, Amit.
Hi.
Look, you.
All well, yeah, all well. Hey, this has been fascinating. And, while you've spoken about your professional journey, let me transgress into your personal life. How have you kind of coped or balanced the two? As you say, traveling so much, just at the whim, going to different parts of the country and different parts of the world and your home life. So I know it's a little bit of a transgression, but it'll just be interesting to understand how you how you managed this?
So, yeah, got married at the age of 28 or 29, I think 28. And wife used to work with Welcome Group and marketing. And then kids came. I have a daughter and a son, and everybody is, I actually have, the way I was brought up, do your own thing. And the only thing was, holidays. Now, I used to travel for 300 days, 250 days in a year. And I was going to all these places which were fancy or not so fancy, but they were great fun. So for me, I was on a perpetual holiday. Now, what happens is, how do these people go on a holiday? So anyway, I created the farm and I said, look, and they got involved with the farm. And so weekends were spent at the farming and working with your hands and trying to grow things and driving the tractor around and, teaching them everything. And a lot of times, big hotel chains used to do a lot of back-to-back deals with me. Okay, we'll give you this kind of money, and then, we'll give you 2 weeks of free stay and holiday in any property you pick up. So I used to send them there, or I used to join them for some time. And that is how the personal life evolved, because for me, going to these places and spending, say, 3 months in Africa, 2 months here, these very luxurious properties and all over, that was a holiday.
Yeah, very interesting. Murli, you had
I
a
did.
real hand up, not a virtual hand up. You had a real hand
Yeah,
up.
I know. Aditya, you know more. I'm a contemporary of his sister, and the famous holy celebrations are such. And I just wanted to say thank you for, I think at Robert Saab's farewell, I'm one of the pictures I've been immortalized. I'm there, we on our shoulders, we are carrying Robert Saab. And he was good enough to put it up in one of those Facebook posts.
I will be
I'd just
sharing
love
it
you to
very
share
soon
that.
again.
Yeah, please do. It's
Yeah.
such been, I've been there in most of the pictures. I'm the one who's carrying him on my. So thank you so much for that.
No, and hope you're doing good. So 3 days back, I started sharing some images every day on the Stephanian and Lal Sitara group. And my God, every picture, few hundred people connect with me on that. So every day in the evening, I put one picture of my college days. And a lot of people have been seeing, they've never seen college like that.
Thank you so much. It's been
Yeah.
grateful.
So last question, Manisha, if you're still there.
Yeah.
You had a question.
Yeah, I am. Hi, Aditya.
Hello.
So it was so fabulous hearing about your journey, because my dad worked with AGFA all his life.
Oh, really?
So I've been around a lot of cameras and films and everything.
Was he based in Delhi?
But no, he was in the marketing. He was actually in the accounts department, and then he shifted himself to marketing because he loved to sell the films to his dealers.
Was it Nazafgarh office?
Yeah, Najafgarh office. Yeah, he was Mr. R.L. Jain, Rajendra Lal Jain.
In 1980, 81, I used to know a lot of people in that Nazafgarh office. I used to go there occasionally. Yeah.
Oh, so Mr. Popley was their head once, and I would love my dad to connect with you. He would love
Sure.
it. Like. So what I wanted to ask was, when you started photography, those were not very much paying days, or so what was your actual struggle period? How much time did it took to achieve to get your recognition? And did the Stephanian background help?
Not really, because the kind of things I was doing, I wasn't dealing with any. Today I see, oh, so and so was the MD of that company. I could have straight away gone and met him. It kind of never mattered to me. I met most of these people too late in life to have but I keep telling them, I said, did you, they somehow they also didn't connect with me. So your other question was, the first question was on how did you manage in,
Your
so
Citra.
for
Yeah.
me, one thing is very clear to me. I've collected these 4,000, 5,000 cameras on my own steam, out of my own money. I created this entire museum out of my money. It's the idea is to, so once you made, once you have a house, once you have your basics looked after, the kids have to be, they're on their own. And they all, my son is a gamer, he was with NVIDIA, then he started his own gaming company in Bangalore. Daughter works with an American company called Purpose. They're all doing well. They don't have to, I don't have to support them. And that's the way I was brought up. And that's the way I mean, I don't need that kind of money. Right from the day one, I felt, so till 94, my dad was living in college. So I didn't need a place, but I did invest and bought a place in Delhi. But, one didn't have needs and that desire to create wealth. And I still don't have. I mean, this is my wealth. This is my what I will be leaving behind. I mean, idea is everybody should be leaving behind something which people should remember you by. You created this.
Yeah. So what I meant was the not the monetary aspect, but the career aspect. Like how much time did it take you to achieve recognition as Aditya Arya for photography?
So in 80s, it was as a travel photographer, then 90s as a industrial and a product photographer, 2000 as an advertising photographer. It kept evolving. And because as somebody said, as Sonu said, this photography is actually, it's an archive of Indian industry, how Indian industry evolved. So, so I want to look at it that way. It's like, it's achievements happened. They don't really matter to me. It's what is important is my satisfaction.
Yeah. No, so Aditya, this has been most fascinating. And, the last thing that you've said, that you are actually living surrounded by your wealth. I think that is such a wonderful thing, because a lot of us spend our lives earning money, right? Which is in banks. So you can't live your life surrounded by banknotes or whatever, and you can't share it. You're very loath to share your money with others. But here you are surrounded by your wealth, happily sharing it with everyone and anyone. I think that it is just so fortunate, and you are like totally leading a blessed life. And thank you very much for your time today. We've totally enjoyed it, and we hope to come to your restaurant once this beep pandemic is over.
Thank you. I look forward to welcoming all of you.